So picking up really on the last comments, I wanted to ask how ratification would help the State Department continue to advocate for women's rights, both here and abroad, and how you would be able to use CEDAW, if ratified, for the work on behalf of women worldwide.
Sure. As many of you know, that the Secretary and the administration has been very clear that this is going to be a central piece of foreign policy, making sure that women's rights are facilitated around the world. CEDAW is obviously a big priority, but more broadly speaking, as you mentioned, it's very difficult to advocate on behalf of women's rights when we haven't ratified CEDAW, something that we understand very intrinsically. So that's how CEDAW would help us really in forwarding and advancing our broader agenda and making sure that women's issues and women's rights around the world stay at the forefront of our foreign policy and really kind of enacting it on a broader level. So.
And maybe one more follow-up. If you can say anything about the interaction with between the State Department and other departments in the administration and how that would be facilitated.
Well, we're just making sure that we are engaging other government agencies to the extent that they can be involved in whatever help that we can have in forwarding and advancing this. And it's really very important that we are all coordinated here. So we are very much coordinated with many of the other agencies, also with the White House, Leg Affairs team. So it's really a coordinated process across the government to be able to make sure that our collective efforts are realized. So,
Charlotte, I wondered if you could say a few more words about your views on what needs to happen now in order to really make this happen.
Okay. As many of you know, there's now this coalition, which has been formed in Washington and is advancing this, and we need 67 senators to vote yes. That doesn't seem like too big a deal, does it? No. 67 senators, come on. This is the opportunity to prove for the Republicans to prove that they aren't entirely the party of no. So I think that we as women really have to get out there and say that we're going to hold all of those senators responsible for this vote. I mean, seriously, I know that many of us don't consider ourselves necessarily very influential with Republicans, but I think that we have to go beyond just party labels and start to say that this is a vote, a referendum for women of the world. This is a vote about the U.S. being serious about its commitment to the women of the United States and the women of the world, and I think we need to keep those two arguments together. I want to reinforce what Zari said about the fact that this gives permission to other governments and other parts of the world to get off the hook, and that's a responsibility we must take seriously. But it is equally important that we understand that this is also for us, and that's what, to me, a global women's movement is about, which is that we understand our fate is intertwined with the fate of women around the world, and it's about both of us. So I think, therefore, we have an obligation to get out there and say to all of these senators that this is the time when they must show up for women. This is International Women's Day today. This is the 15th anniversary of the Beijing platform in September, so it's exactly, this whole year. It is also the 30th or just past the 30th anniversary of CEDAW. It's so many things that I feel that we need to be quite serious in saying that they will be held accountable at the polls and get all kinds of mainstream women's organizations and women's clubs and women's groups. And that means we also have to counter the miseducation about what CEDAW is. in the United States. And that is rampant, and I know it's difficult, but we just need to get out there with basic, fundamental information about what this really means and take on all those myths that defeated the Equal Rights Amendment in this country and that defeat so many of the things we care about, because people just don't really know what it's about. And so I think maybe somebody else who's working more in the coalition will talk about some of the specific ways, but this really is about getting out there in every single state of the United States, at the grassroots, to women's clubs, to women in churches and places of faith, as well as all kinds of social clubs, and saying, vote for your daughters, saying to the men, vote for your daughters, for the women, vote for yourself, vote for your daughters. So time to do that. I did want to just I forgot to mention when you asked earlier about violence against women, I think the Inter-American Commission decision on Gonzalez versus Colorado was a really important use of international treaties to support women's rights. And for those of you interested in violence against women issues, it's a really important example of how I think many more things in this country could be utilized internationally. So we can talk about it in detail later, but it is an important thing for us here in this country.